I am going to first start by turning over to Liz McKenna on behalf of Lift Every Voice Oregon, who led the ballot initiative to bring this forward. I will then give you some background and turn to Nadia Dahab from Sugarman Dahab to help answer questions about what this means from a legal perspective, and end by talking about implementation of moving Measure 114 forward. I am happy to turn over to Liz. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. It sounds like you can hear me. I'm Liz McKenna. I'm with Lift Every Voice Oregon. We started several years ago, right after the Parkland shooting, to try to get a ballot initiative on the ballot so the people of Oregon could speak. And we tried several times, but finally we were able to get the ballot initiative on in basically 2022 for the election. And it's was a grassroots process throughout. Thousands of people collected signatures, many more thousands, 161,000 signed them, and then the people of Oregon voted. And so this is really an example of what can be done with people who are motivated to try to make Oregon safer. We're thrilled that finally, after waiting, the Court of Appeals has opened the door for this, we believe, for this initiative start being implemented. There'll be some little time for actually making that happen, and we'll let Nadia, our attorney, talk more about that. But we've been waiting 825 days since it became law to get it initiative on to be part of the Oregon law to make Oregonians safer. They deserve it. It's really an exciting day, and we're thankful to everyone who participated, all the organizations, the Alliance and Moms and Giffords and other groups that came along, particularly when it was on the ballot and it needed to be passed. It was a tremendous effort, joint effort of all the groups who really know how important it is to have Oregon safer. So I'd be open for any questions, but that's, oh, one more thing I want to let you know, and there is a press conference at in person at 3:30 today at Augustana Lutheran on the Northwest 14th, or excuse me, Northeast 14th and Knott, and everyone's welcome to come, and the press should have their a press statement for that already. But this is a great opportunity to find out more information. So thank you for letting us be a part of this, and that's it.
Thanks so much to Liz for kicking us off. We are so grateful for Levo's leadership. So again, thanks for joining us. My name is Jess Marks, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for a Safe Oregon, formerly known as the Oregon Alliance for Gun Safety. We are an advocacy organization that connects people from all across Oregon, including survivors of gun-related tragedies, gun owners, rural residents, urban residents, veterans, doctors, first responders, and local community members and leaders in a collective effort to create safer communities for all of us. We've gathered you here to share information about the Oregon Court of Appeals decision from this morning, which came out at 8 a.m., which found Measure 114 constitutional under the Oregon Constitution. This decision reverses the judgment from the Harney County Circuit Court, bringing Oregon a significant step closer to implementing the life-saving policies of Measure 114. I'm now glad to turn over to Nadia Dahab to talk more about this case.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadia Dahab. I'm an attorney with Sugarman Dahab, and it was my great privilege to represent Lift Every Voice Oregon and a number of other organizations in an amicus brief that we filed in this case. But this morning, I'm here to talk a little bit about the Court of Appeals decision and what it means. In the decision that the Court of Appeals issued this morning, the court declared all three aspects of Measure 114 constitutional. The effect of that decision, of course, is to overturn the trial court's earlier decision concluding otherwise. The plaintiffs in this case, you'll recall from prior media coverage and prior stages of this case, the plaintiffs had challenged the measure on state constitutional grounds, so on Oregon Constitution's right to bear arms for self-defense. In its decision, the court recognized the legislatures and, in the context of ballot measures, the people of Oregon's authority to enact reasonable regulations to promote public safety, and ruled that that's exactly what Measure 114 does. And I'll talk briefly about those three aspects and how the court treated them. As to the permit to purchase and background check requirements of Measure 114, the court ruled that those two requirements are reasonable legislative responses to identified public safety concerns stemming from dangerous and untrained individuals obtaining and using firearms and using firearms without appropriate firearm safety training. Because the court viewed Measure 114 and those aspects of it as a reasonable legislative response to promote public safety without sort of unduly burdening the right to bear arms, the court found that those two portions of Measure 114 are constitutional. As to the large capacity magazine ban, the court ruled that this too is a reasonable legislative response to identified public safety concerns, this time stemming from the advancements in firearm technology and the availability of those advancements to the general public, which have created observable threats to public safety. The Court of Appeals looked to the preamble of Measure 114 and all of the important public safety reasons that this measure was adopted by the people of Oregon and found that that regulation too was constitutional. At the end of its decision, because the court found Measure 114 constitutional, the court sent the case back to the trial court for entry of a judgment in the state's favor. So a declaratory judgment finding that Measure 114 is on its face constitutional. From this point forward, the case could take a couple of different paths. The plaintiffs in the case now have 35 days from today to file a petition for review in the Oregon Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to review the Court of Appeals decision. From there are two possible paths forward. The Supreme Court could take the case, could decide to review it, or could let the Court of Appeals decision stand and decide not to take the case. If the Supreme Court decides to review the case, then the injunction that the trial court entered will likely remain in place until the Supreme Court reviews the case and makes its decision. If the Supreme Court does not take the case and chooses to let the Oregon Court of Appeals decision stand, then the injunction will likely get vacated when the case goes back to the trial court, consistent with the Court of Appeals direction in the opinion and issue this morning. Either way, we'll know more if and when the plaintiffs decide to petition for review. So 35 days from today, we'll know whether they intend to and if they will. And if they do, the Supreme Court will still take some time to make a decision about whether to review the case. So in terms of timeline, I think we're still a few months out of knowing exactly which of those two paths the case will take, whether the Supreme Court will take it or whether it'll sort of let the Court of Appeals decision stand and send it back to the trial court for entry of judgment. And I will pass, I'm happy to take questions later, but for now we'll pass it back to Jess.
Thank you, Nadia, for the overview. We have strong evidence that Measure 114 will save lives. Expert researchers from Johns Hopkins University analyzed the impact of Measure 114 and found that over a 10-year period, it would save 1,000 lives in Oregon, the vast majority of those preventing suicides and homicides. This is a measure that Oregonians came together to pass. It was thanks to the work of Oregonians that we are where we are today and can create a safer future for all of us. Finally, I would like to turn to Paul Kemp for closing remarks, and then we will open for questions. Hi,
Can,
Paul.
can you hear me, Jess?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay,
Thanks.
sorry. Yeah, I think this is a good day for Oregon. A lot of people have worked very hard on this over the years, and our family suffered from a act of gun violence, which took the life of one of our family members. And I think a bill like this is going to relieve or mitigate this happening to other families in the future. So I don't think any family wants to walk this path, and I think it's a good step for Oregon. And we know permit to purchase laws in other states have reduced incidents of gun violence. So I think it's the right step. And we also have seen what happens when firearms are released to buyers before a complete background check has happened. So I think this is the right step for Oregon. And thanks to all the hard work of everybody who's worked on this measure to get it to this point.
Thank you all. We are now happy to take questions. If you'd like to come off of mute, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or you can put questions in chat. Thanks, Celine. Please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you for taking our questions. I wanted to ask, so Tony, the attorney on the opposition, he says that they do intend to appeal this decision. So I just want to know now that it seems like there will be some form of an appeal, what do you guys have to say in response to that?
Yeah, Nadia, do you want to take the first answer and then I can follow up?
Sure. I suppose just as a procedural matter, once they do appeal, I mean, I think the Supreme Court may or may not take the case, right? I think that they can certainly file a notice of appeal, or I'm sorry, a petition for review with the Oregon Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has discretion to take it or not take it. If the court takes the case, that will certainly leave the injunction in place until the Supreme Court makes its decision. If they don't, the Supreme Court very well could just let the very well-reasoned decision of the Court of Appeals and straightforward decision of the Court of Appeals stand, which would allow the case to go back and the injunction to be lifted in pretty short order, which would be, obviously the right decision in our view, and then it's sort of the best case scenario to make sure that lives are protected and the important public safety objectives of Measure 114 go into place. I'll let Jess weigh in further on that.
Thanks, Nadia. The gun lobby, backed and paid for by the gun industry, has brought these lawsuits against the wishes of Oregonians. Oregonians brought this measure to the ballot. They passed it, and it's the gun lobby that has brought these lawsuits forward. And we intend, in partnership with all the folks who've worked on this issue, to see Oregonians' wishes through. So as much as we anticipate that expected appeal, will continue to fight for Oregonians' votes and wishes.
Thank you.
Joelle, I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you for taking our questions. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to a statement that we received from Tony saying that today Measure 114 has turned millions of Oregonians into criminals because their right to bear arms has been erased by Oregon's judiciary. I just want to give you a chance to respond to that, please.
Thanks. I am happy to answer, and Nadia or Liz, if you want to add on as well. Oregon has a strong tradition of firearm ownership that we respect. 50% of Oregon households own firearms. And this bill does nothing to stop responsible firearm owners from purchasing firearms. What it does do is ensure every firearm that's sold has a completed background check, something all Oregonians agree on. The gun lobby continues to perpetuate misinformation to provoke fear that is simply not true. Liz or Nadia, anything you want to add?
Not for me.
I guess I would add one thing. We don't believe that it turns any of the people into criminals at this point at all. And if it becomes law, there is a provision in Measure 114 that allows people who have large capacity magazines to keep them, provided they keep them at their house or use them just in certain permitted ways, like at a shooting range. And so it's not taking weapons away and not causing you to be a criminal. It is going to be prohibited to carry, 50 or even 20 rounds in a magazine out on the streets, or use it in ways that we think are not reasonable. But anyway, there are limitations, but it doesn't make somebody a criminal immediately.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We appreciate your coverage and commitment to community safety in Oregon.